Oh, you're
fish fry.
kidding. Oh, my goodness.
So we ended up, I had one of my nephews there who was, his father was the chef. He was the one who ended up with the winery later on. But he was still in high school, and he was staying with me that summer. Mm-hmm. And he said, we can do this. Wow. So they had all these fish in my kitchen, and he would
oh
had
my gosh.
about 4 pans on the stove, and we would brown the fish well, and he would then put them in these big pans in the oven to keep them warm. And he did a marvelous job. I mean, he could...
A heroic job.
Yeah, each one would have buttered almonds going over the fish.
Oh my gosh.
They were lovely. And then they would have people rush them up to the dining hall.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh, it was a wild experience, but it came off very well. But it was right after that I had a call from the League of Women Voters, and they were meeting with their national president, who I had met, and I really admired a lot. And they were meeting in Helena, and the 2 women who had been really their chief people had decided that they were going to go back to school. They were going to go to law school. And then one of the other women who we thought would take over had a job which she depended on and would not allow her to take time off from it. And anyway, I told them no, that I couldn't do it. I was planning to go on to graduate school to start a PhD. And finally the woman said, she said, well, you know, if you don't take it, we're going to disenfranchise the League of Women Voters in Montana.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it for this year anyway.
So the events really kept bumping into you rather than you go charging out after them.
That's right. And I ended up, the one woman on the board who was most interested in outreach and political activity was Daphne Bugby, who ended up, you know, we were colleagues all the way through those years. We worked with the League and lobbied for the League, and then were in the Constitutional Convention together.
Yes, would you explain how that came about?
Well, the League had always had a position that our Constitution needed substantial amendment. It was antique.
When was the original one created?
In 79, I think. 89 maybe it was.
1889, yeah.
And the League had asked for, and the legislature had passed a couple of study commissions. One to study the adequacy of our Constitution. Mm-hmm. And that was a good study. It went through it and looked at all of the areas that, a few areas where it still worked, and a lot of areas where it really prevented good work, mm-hmm. and others that were inconsequential. And they recommended, you know, 2 things. One, we could change our Constitution so that we could at least amend, have up to 3 substantial amendments mm-hmm. at one time, or to have a constitutional convention. And they chose to have the convention. Uh-huh. And some of our very best people were on that, and because they were on that commission, they couldn't run as delegates. But uh-huh. a lot of those were League members. A lot of the people who ran as delegates were League members. And we had 24 women, I think. We'd never had more than 3 or 4 in the legislature at one time. What
was your official role at that time, or name? Did you?
I was
as a member of the Constitutional Convention, or what was your role? What was your? title, so to
I was
speak.
elected as a delegate to the Constitutional
Okay,
Convention.
got it.
And then I was elected as Western Vice Chairman of the convention.
Well, that was quite something for a woman, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was good. And one of the reasons I was elected as that is that the League had taken a very strong stance that the convention must be nonpartisan, because we knew that other states that had gone through this, if it ended up partisan, it didn't ever pass. And there had been especially a pretty good one in Maryland that just got bogged down in politics and didn't go anywhere. But also at that time, that convention, that commission, hired a director, and they hired a director from the University of Montana, young guy who had just graduated. The professor, the well-known professor there, didn't think the Constitution would have a chance, and he wasn't interested in it. He was going off to Europe that summer, and so he turned it over to this young guy, Dale Harris, who was convinced that it really could happen. And he worked with us in the League, and he worked with the delegates, and he hired a staff of young college, just out of college students, to draw up an analysis of what each committee would need at the convention. And we all studied that. And we had classes, and we went on the radio and took questions, and he also set up that every organization that had their summer meetings that summer would have some of us go, or he would go sometimes, and get them to pass a resolution urging a constitutional convention. And he had a marvelously good political sense. And everyone was surprised when it passed that we were going to have a convention, and then, we ran as delegates.
And about what time is this? What year?
This is 71.
Okay.
And we had to run with a party designation. And that's the first time I'd ever really done that, because as a League member, you have to be nonpartisan.
Which was one of the reasons they used the League so significantly in this process, because it was one of the largest non-aligned, nonpartisan but organized political bodies.
There weren't that many of us in the League across the state, but the thing is that we were the group that had studied this, and we had maintained an active role in the political lives of the various communities, and that worked. It worked well.
So you were elected as a delegate by, what kind of an election was that?
Actually, we had to be elected in the same way that the legislature was elected.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, they were elected in multi-county districts. So I ran in Gallatin and Park County. And there were, to begin with, 33 of us candidates for 6 seats. And that was cut down to 12 after a primary. And I did well in that, and I think one of the reasons that I was elected as the vice president was because I had taken such a strong stance on nonpartisanship. And the other woman, who was a friend of mine, but who was supported by the Democratic Party, there were a lot more Democrats elected than Republicans. Not a great number, but slightly more. And the Democratic Party really wanted us to take over Here with the Democrats should be running this thing since we had the majority. And we also had all these people who knew that if we went partisan, we would lose. So the person who nominated me as for Western Vice President was a very articulate Republican.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Wade the Hood, and he was marvelous. He got up and he gave this wonderful speech about who I was and why I should have this job. I'd only talked to him for about 5 minutes beforehand, but he had known my son.
Yes.
And he also knew that the Republicans, as well as the League members, would be better off if it were nonpartisan.
Yes, of course.
And that's what it was. And we elected a Democratic chair and a Republican vice chair. And then we had a Democrat and a Republican as Western and Eastern vice chairs. And it was, it was a marvelous experience writing the Constitution. We got all of that done in like 68 days.
Oh my goodness, I was going to ask you how long it took.
Yeah, no, not 68, 58 days.
Oh my goodness.
We had 60 days and we saved a couple of days because we wanted to use it for planning the promotion of it, and they didn't let us do that.
And so, when did you go immediately from that experience into the senatorial experience?
No. When that was over, we had a good Democratic woman in the Senate, and she was up for re-election, and no way would I even think about running against her. But as a matter of fact, she didn't run a good campaign, and she lost. And in the meantime, I worked at various things locally. I think that was about the time we had the McGovern campaign, maybe, and did a lot of political work on that. And by the time the next election came up, I was ready to run.
And you ran for senator?
I ran for senator. And actually, the guy who had won the time before had said, I'm going to have a tough time against Dorothy Eck, and he decided not to run.
Oh. And you served, how many years did you serve as a senator?
20.
20, isn't that something?
Yeah, yeah.